Good evening and welcome to the May 9th, 2024 meeting of the Walnut Creek Planning Commission. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Kwok,
Present.
Commissioner Ward,
Here.
Commissioner Klopp is absent, Commissioner Reiser,
Here.
Commissioner Nating,
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson is absent, Chair Strongman.
Here. Thank you. Moving on to item 2, which is the consent calendar. We do have one item on the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to accept or desire to discuss the consent calendar item?
Move to approve the consent calendar, i.e. the meeting minutes of 4:25.
I'll second.
Please call the roll, please.
Commissioner Kwok,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Klopp is absent, Commissioner Reiser,
Yes.
Commissioner Nating,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson is absent, Chair Strongman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And moving on to public communications, this portion of the meeting is reserved for comments on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the commissioner cannot act on these items raised during the public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request for clarification, or refer the item to staff. Do we have any member of the public here that would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we will now close public communications. Move on to item 4, public hearings. The first one will be 4A, faith-based auxiliary dwellings, a zoning ordinance amendment, and it's citywide. We'll start with a staff presentation.
Good evening, Chair Strongman and members of the Commission. My name is Aaron Sage. I'm a principal planner with the Community Development Department, and this is the first of many zoning amendments to implement our housing element, which, as you probably know, was certified by the state last October. So you'll be seeing a lot of me. So this item deals with accessory dwelling units on so-called faith-based properties, and I'll get into definitions of that a little bit later. So first of all, a little bit of background. As you probably know, accessory dwelling units are a very important source of affordable housing. In Walnut Creek specifically, they have produced about 55% of all of our below market rate housing since 2015. When you look at the low income category, they constitute about 80% of that category, and about 98% of the moderate income category. So needless to say, these are an important way that Walnut Creek satisfies its affordable housing obligations. Having said that, one of the programs in the housing element was to allow ADUs on faith-based properties as a way of expanding on that important source of housing. And specifically, program H2Q of the housing element commits the city to, quote, expand the ADU ordinance to be applicable to faith-based properties. Just a quick note, as you probably know, the city must continue to make timely progress on implementation of its housing element programs in order to maintain certification of its housing element. So the housing element program does not define what it means by faith-based organizations, and the zoning ordinance doesn't define that term either. However, the zoning ordinance has a closely related term called religious assembly use, and the definition of that is on the screen in front of you. And this is the use that we are relying upon to implement this program. This use is permitted in various zoning districts, as you can see listed there. Just a quick note that if a religious assembly use is allowed in a PD zone, the specific approved PD for that property has to list religious assembly as a permitted use. And there are approximately 35 properties that, with this type of use in the city, so that kind of gives you a sense of the scope of how many ADUs we could potentially see from this amendment. Now, the The program in the housing element does not specify how many ADUs should be allowed per religious assembly property. So this is a policy decision that the city council will need to make. And what staff has brought forward is an approach that basically tries to follow the standards and the types of ADUs that you would typically see, which would be one detached ADU on a single family property. So in the proposed amendment, we've implemented that approach. One ADU will be allowed per religious assembly property. Junior ADUs, which are specific to single-family homes, would not be allowed for religious assembly under this amendment. All other standards that apply to an ADU on a single-family property would apply to this situation. And I've listed a few of those standards here: maximum floor area of 1,000 square feet, a maximum building height in most cases of 16 feet. There's a few exceptions to that. And then a requirement that the architecture of the ADU be consistent with the architecture of the main building, and there's specific language that defines how that consistency is achieved. So with that, I'll just summarize our recommendation on the item. Consider the proposed zoning ordinance amendments to allow ADUs on properties with religious assembly uses, and adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt the proposed amendments. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Questions for staff?
Just a quick one. Has there been any outreach or engagement with the faith-based community regarding, so to date? I mean, have they chimed in on it, and what's that look like?
We did send a letter regarding tonight's hearing and briefly summarizing the amendments to all of the religious assembly properties in Walnut Creek. We didn't hear back from any of them thus far. City Council would be another opportunity for them to get engaged, and we'll notify them of that as well. We also did an e-blast to about 7,000 subscribers to our affordable housing contact list, and that includes a lot of people from the faith community, so they were notified via that channel as well. But yeah, thus far we haven't received any comments from members of the faith community thus far.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Commissioner Ward.
So just following up on that question, so you don't know whether any of these faith-based housing providers would be interested in having more than one ADU? No idea of whether they're interested at all, or whether the limit of one is problematic to their programming?
Correct. We haven't received feedback on that specific question at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be a new allowance, so this would be one additional than that they would currently be allowed. So
Okay.
this wouldn't be any kind of limitation.
Well, it is a limitation. You're saying that they're going to treat the church, essentially the religious building, as one single-family home, so they get one ADU. Or did I misunderstand that?
I think what Secretary Kwan was just saying was that currently a religious assembly use is not eligible for any ADUs, and the proposed amendment would expand upon the current status quo and allow one ADU. So I think in that regard it is an expansion from what is currently allowed.
Okay, right. I mean, that's zero is less than one for sure. But you're treating the property regardless of size or the type of programs that they have historically done, or there's no consideration other than one lot, one ADU. That's the way the ordinance is being drafted here.
Not in the current proposal, but if the commission wishes to forward on to the council, a more permissive recommendation, we'd be happy to carry that to the council.
Okay, so are we commenting, or is this just questions here we're doing?
Questions right now.
Okay, I'll hold then. Thanks.
Any other questions?
If I could just add briefly to my response, if a religious assembly use happens to have a residential use on the property, then that residential use is eligible separately for whatever ADUs that it would qualify for. So we're not sort of forcing someone to, double count or, not get credit separately for the religious assembly use.
So if they already have a home for staff, on the property historically, a pastor's house or something like that, then they would get two, one for the church
Correct.
building and one for the, interesting, okay. I'll still hold my comments.
Okay, any other questions right now? Thank you, and we will now open the hearing for the faith-based accelerate ADUs on faith-based properties. Do we have any member of the public who would like to comment on this item? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Rachel Lorenz. I live in Walnut Creek. I'm a renter, and I would just like to put my support out there for adding any further housing we can possibly get. A lot of single-family homes in Walnut Creek. As a renter, it's very hard to afford them. Anything we can do to expand the ADU would be amazing. I'm currently living a lot that was just sold, going to be probably turned into more single-family homes. So anything we can do to expand that would be incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I'm going to close the public hearing on this item and return it back to the commission for comments. And who would like to go first for the comments? Yeah, Commissioner Ward.
I guess I'll go since I started here. So I'm going back, as you probably have guessed, to the limitation on one ADU per lot with the religious-based organizations, regardless of the size of the lot or anything else that is happening there. And I just think there's a difference between something being equitable or fair and something being equal. And, to say, oh, we're trying to be fair to everybody by saying you can only have one each, in my mind is not, it's not really fair, because some of our religious-based organizations have really been carrying they have been taking the burden of all of our obligation to provide housing on a more affordable basis, or for homeless people, unhoused individuals. And we have been happy to let them take all the responsibility for that. We as a city have a ethical and legal obligation to provide some of these services to our community members. And I think it doesn't make sense to treat those people, those organizations, or organizations that just have a huge amount of land historically and want to address the housing crisis that we have, either to provide more affordable housing, as we've heard commented, everybody's in need of, or to provide more stable and permanent housing for unhoused people, to try and transition them off the streets and into more dignified and safe housing for them. So I don't know whether there's a demand for this, or whether some of these organizations would do this if we allowed them to, because apparently we just don't know that. But I think it doesn't seem reasonable to just artificially restrict the number of ADUs we could have just because it's fair or simple, or to do it. And if we're going to do that, why is the number one? Why wouldn't it be 5 if all the other building code or other planning obligations were met? It seems very arbitrary to me, and I don't understand the restriction being put on there artificially.
So if I can offer a thought for the commission's consideration, just to follow up on Commissioner Ward's comments. And apologize everybody that I have to be on Zoom. We're at a conference in Southern California, so I'm here. But so the program in the housing element is proposing this expansion to faith-based property as one of the housing strategies, and the program is pretty flexible. It doesn't, it's a basis upon which the city can consider this type of expansion. And I think the intent of this first step is that, this is not the final thing that you can do under this program. And this is kind of taking the first step at implementing the program by the timeline that it's outlined the housing element. And also that in consideration that state law has other provisions to allow religious assembly properties to develop housing that's in addition to ADUs. For example, you have the SB4, if the religious property has qualifying projects, they can develop housing, under the a ministerial approval process. And you have the AB 2162 provisions with support housing plus supportive services. That's also a avenue for such properties to expand. So in consideration of all these tools, I think the intent for this amendment is that, we start with what is provided to, by state law to other residential properties, and then, going from there to satisfy the intent of the program and to further implementation of it.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that very much. I don't understand the limitation without any details with regard to a particular application. And maybe there's no interest in this at all, but it seems like we're saying that a substantial portion of our affordable housing or is being provided by ADUs, and we know that a substantial portion of our kind of emergency and shelter housing for unhoused people is being provided by these faith-based organizations in our community. And so I don't see why we would limit people's imaginations in terms of turning underutilized property into something that can really serve our community and serve a tremendously underserved portion of the community that we've been looking at. I would prefer that it be something more flexible based on the particular circumstances of the property and the program that's being provided, rather than just saying one each regardless of the particular details of the site where it would be considered.
So if I could see if I could understand what you're saying, is it would be more of a function of of the available land. That if there was a functionality of, how much per, if they have 5 acres, they could have 3, or if they have 10 acres, they could have 10 or something. I don't know. Picking numbers out of my number.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's got 10 acres in downtown Walnut Creek, but they've been hiding it if they do. But yeah, I mean, if there was a lot of land, or if there was a desire to create a more integrated community of ADUs with social services involved, I just don't see why we should squelch that imagination and that idea without even, just because, well, we want it to be fair, everybody gets one. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to support this regardless because I think it's a great idea, and I'm totally in favor of it. It just seems like that most applications to build ADUs or anything else in our community, the details matter, and the site matters, and the amount of land matters, and all these things make a difference in terms of whether or not we can support and approve applications for these kind of housing items. And so I think I would just hope that there would be, if not today, then going forward, a little more flexibility to allow people to think big and to really use their creativity and all the resources that we have to try and serve under-resourced people and to create more affordable housing in a community that desperately needs it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Commissioner Needing.
Hi, Claire. You and I had spoken specifically about I couldn't remember what it was. I just called it Yes in God's Backyard because that's how I remember it when it was passed by, I believe, it was supported by Wiener's office. But one thing I hadn't asked, so Commissioner Ward, that was one thing I had asked Claire was would SB4 still be alive? Because that, to me, is important. So Claire, do you know when SB4 sunsets?
I believe it is in sometime 2036.
2036.
But also keep in mind that anytime, recently, anytime that a bill has a sunset date, it has, either been extended when it's close to being sunsetted, or it's being sunsetted, or that date has been further extended by the legislature.
Right. I've personally worked on tiny homes in faith-based on faith-based land as a designer, And I read some of the public comments about safety considerations and traffic and who's going to be there to manage it. And my husband and I we have built a community at a nearby church, and I can, tell you from experience that most churches are so involved with parents, elders, a lot of the youth, that there's constantly every single night something going on. Not to say that the parking lot is extremely full and that I'm bringing light to churches now having traffic that nobody knew about, but it's to say that there is life in a lot of these campuses that go beyond the Sundays. So the safety aspect, I'm not worried about that at all. What I share a lot of the same feelings from Commissioner Ward, and so it would be interesting to me to see that should SB4 sunset, that then this ordinance help supplant some of the flexibility of those homes that the churches were able to give, notwithstanding this one. To me, I think that would be something reasonable because it's still following the intent of SB4. It's still following the intent of the general plan. I don't even know if that's even possible. If the general plan I saw the language, if it specifically stated it was only one, or if the intent was to provide, I believe it said ADUs were 7% of the total housing. It was 147 units. Now I'm just going off memory, which is a terrible thing to do. But that was kind of my thought.
Thank you. Comments down there?
I guess I'll share my comments and my thoughts. So I do want to also recognize the work of the city staff for all the work they've done to make this consistent with the current state law, as this appears to have been a process that is very much needed, I would say. As state law continues to evolve, we should make sure the city municipal code also stays in step. And so I also did some numbers because I was kind of curious to know, how many properties are there? And as Aaron said earlier, there are about 35 properties in the city that would be covered by the changes to the faith-based communities. And so to what Melissa was saying earlier, to the one ADU, one property, that's maybe a potential maximum of 34, 35 throughout the city with this change. And with a RENA allocation of about 500 units, 34, 35 is a very small amount with impact. So that was my perspective coming into this. I do very much appreciate the efforts that we're doing as someone who is also a renter. And as someone who is also looking for housing in the city, I do understand it's very difficult to find housing. And so any effort to make sure we can house people in all sorts of communities in Walnut Creek, it's a wonderful gesture for the city to the communities that live here and communities that want to live here.
Thank you. Would we be interested in maybe recommending this resolution to the city council, but add the comments that we'd like to consider more, expand their thinking a little bit on that, to having more than one per unit?
I mean, yes, I would like that, obviously. I think that, I just think that we need a little bit of flexibility, not to put a restriction on something that when there is an opportunity for something bigger. It may not be necessary. There may be other avenues that are more appropriate, but to the extent we can make things easier for people to provide more affordable housing for our community, I think we should do that. I don't think we should throw up any artificial roadblocks or additional administrative burdens or anything, even if we could. And we don't even have to think big ourselves. We're just saying other people can think big about this. So I don't I mean, I'm not advocating for us to throw out any requirements or guidelines or safeguards or guardrails or anything. I'm just saying that if there's an appropriate location where more could be done and there's a group of people that want to do that, I don't think we should stop them because we thought it was fair to have only one per, because I don't think that's fair. It's equal, but it's not fair.
Comments on that?
Since we're the recommending body, I think we're all of the opinion that we should recommend to the city council that we do approve of this and want them to consider possibly a number higher than one, or the nexus of the SB4 point that was brought up, that they can already build under this SB4. And if that sunsets, or some sort of language that allows that to be a consideration when this is being accepted or mentioned in it.
How you write that, I have no idea.
Yeah, well, I think just think about it.
Maybe we leave those to the people who know how to do that, right? That's our idea. So, it's great to be on this side of the table, I've got to say.
So can I add a thought? So one of the things I came across as I was reading through the, what are they called, the draft amendments to the code, is that currently there may be certain communities that occupy multiple parcels. And so, although I think my understanding is currently, if the amendments were to go in, it would be, regardless of how many parcels the building occupies, it will still be one ADU allowable to it. But if we did it on a one parcel, one ADU requirement or metric, then that might allow a little bit more flexibility for buildings that occupy multiple parcels.
I don't mind that, but I think I would prefer that we recommend this resolution as is, but also add those things as, okay, city council, consider this, you can change it easier than we. And could we have a motion?
And I'll just add, if the planning commission, that's what the commission wants to do, you can adopt the resolution with the, additional comments regarding considerations for flexibility, for building character, site character, lot size, comparable use, that kind of things.
Thank
You can
you.
include that in your motion.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I would make a motion that has exactly that. Thank you for that. So we want to recommend the resolution as written, but with the addition that we would like the council to consider additional flexibility based on all the things Claire just said, so lot size, support of the, whatever program people are considering, just that there not be necessarily a strict numerical limitation without consideration of the particular circumstances that surround a potential application for constructing ADUs. Is that enough?
That's worthy of a second.
Well-
That's worthy of a second. I'll second it unless we need to.
Unless we need to fix it somehow.
You need,
So just for the record, it sounds like the motion was for the ordinance to be adopted with the council, with the Plan Commission recommending that the council consider flexibility, consider more than one unit. Was the motion including the match the SB4 if it sunsets, or did you want to leave that out?
I think that was one idea in terms of how we could build in flexibility to that. Is that correct?
Well,
Or-
also, if somebody feels, right, Commissioner Ward, that, it's just so vague, then you could use, SB4 has been now tested and tried, and people have used it here in Walnut Creek, and so that's why I only brought that up.
Okay, so that can be added to the motion, and
If
then
everyone's okay
Yeah,
with
council
it.
no,
can
that'd be
consider
great.
it. Great, thank you.
and
Steve, you okay with that seconding?
Absolutely. I'll second that.
please take the roll, please.
Commissioner Kwok,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Klopp is absent, Commissioner Reiser,
Yes.
Commissioner Nating,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson is absent, Chair Strongman.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. And moving on to item 4B, the density bonus ordinance update. Start with staff.
Just give us a minute to load the new presentation. All right, I'll skip the introductions, obviously. This next item is regarding our second amendment that flows out of the housing element related to our density bonus ordinance. So starting with some background, state density bonus law has been in effect since the mid-1970s. The basic idea of the law is that local jurisdictions are required to grant additional density beyond what would otherwise be permitted in that jurisdiction when a development includes a specified level of affordable housing or housing for seniors or other disadvantaged populations. The city adopted, as many other cities have done, it's a local ordinance to implement state density bonus law. That was adopted in 2009. And since 2009, there have been a number of changes to state density bonus law such that we are in need of updating our ordinance to be to reflect those changes to state law. Just to give an example of one of the updates that's needed, for many, many years, state law allowed a maximum density bonus of 35%. So if you had 100 units normally allowed by the local zoning, the project would be eligible for up to 135 units. And the city's current density bonus ordinance kind of bakes that in to its own local code. Since over the last 5 to 10 years, the state has adopted, I counted about 12 bills since 2016 that made major changes to the density bonus law. That 35% is now 50% for the income categories that are available, and then you can go even higher than that for special scenarios. So that's just to give you one of the most obvious examples of why the update is needed. So in 2018, staff initiated an update to the density bonus ordinance, and there was a study session with the Planning Commission in September of 2018, and then there was a follow-up session with the City Council in 2019. And the overall feedback, both from stakeholders that commented during that process, as well as the Planning Commission and Council, was that there needed to be a lot more flexibility in the city's density bonus ordinance to reflect various scenarios that weren't covered by density bonus law. And so staff heard that feedback, started working on bringing back further refined recommendations to council in March of 2020. Of course, we all know what happened in March of 2020. The pandemic basically canceled that process, and tonight is where we're picking it back up again, essentially. The housing element did include a program to adopt, to amend the density bonus ordinance to ensure compliance with current state law and to maintain the existing provisions in our code for density bonus benefits that exceed state requirements. So that's an important sort of feature of the city's density bonus ordinance, is that it allows a conditional use permit to be requested for projects that go above and beyond what the density bonus ordinance allowed at that time. So the density bonus ordinance that we're bringing to you tonight, these are the major elements of what's included in that. The first one is to remove specific affordability and density bonus percentages. the number of incentives or concessions, and reduced parking ratios, all of which are specified in the state law. So rather than repeating what's already in state law, which has changed numerous times in recent years, we're simply referring to the state law, as in it will probably continue to evolve. So this change will limit having to come back, for further local amendments. This also makes our ordinance much shorter and easier to digest, easier to implement, both for applicants and for staff. The old ordinance was about 13 pages, and the proposed ordinance is about 7 pages. Second point is regarding that supplemental density bonus provision that I just mentioned. We're keeping that as we committed to do in the housing element, but we are making it less specific. There's no longer a specific affordability that has to be met to qualify for that, to even ask for that bonus. Now it simply says, anyone can ask for additional density bonus beyond what state law provides through a CUP process. And that lack of specificity actually addresses a lot of the feedback that we got from the Planning Commission and City Council previously. They were wanting specific scenarios added to that supplemental bonus, many of which are already now allowed under state law because of the changes that have happened since 2019. But any other scenarios or flexibility that the council requested would be available through this kind of more open-ended CUP process. The city would retain full discretion over that CUP, so it's the type of approval that doesn't require it to be approved due to state mandates because it goes above and beyond density bonus law. Third, we have a provision in our current ordinance that inclusionary units do not qualify for density bonus benefits, that they don't count as the affordable units that qualify you for a density bonus. That is in conflict with case law, and so that needs to be deleted. The fourth bullet is also we're deleting a requirement that applicants have to show, quote, economic feasibility in order to qualify for waivers or reductions of development standards. Waivers or reductions of development standards are basically whenever a specific height requirement, setback, parking, anything that would preclude the project from achieving the density and the incentives or concessions that it is entitled to, then along with those things, the project is entitled to reduce or waive those standards. And the state has narrowed down the types of things that that cities can request related to those waivers or reductions. And so this change acknowledges that. And then finally, we have requirements currently that affordable units have to be, quote, dispersed evenly throughout the project, not concentrated in a specific area, and, quote, compatible with the design and appearance of the overall project. We are essentially maintaining those requirements, but with more objective language that kind of meets the objectivity test that we now have to apply to all standards related to housing development in the state. I'll just note that attachment 9 of your packet kind of provided a point-by-point discussion of the previous recommendations that were brought to City Council and supported by City Council, and basically why those are already addressed by state law or by the flexible supplemental bonus provision that's in the proposed amendments tonight. So again, our recommendation is that you consider the proposed ordinance amendments and adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt the proposed amendments. And as with the previous item, you're obviously welcome to include any additional flexibility or recommendations that you have on top of the proposed ordinance.
Thank you for your presentation. It's a lot of work. Questions for staff? I don't see a whole lot, is that? Okay, we will now open it up for public comments, public hearing. So any member of the public would like to come and comment on this, they're welcome to do it, and I'll have 2 minutes. And seeing nobody rushing up here, we will now close the public hearing and bring it back for comments from the commission. Or a motion.
I'll do it. I'd like to just comment that that was a tremendous amount of work and expertise that went into combing through the existing ordinances and bringing them up to code. And so I really have to commend you for that, and also for giving us a report that we could understand when we read it. And I appreciate that very much as well, because these concepts are extremely complicated, and it really was a great effort. So thank you very much for that. And with that, if there's no more comment from anybody else, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution as drafted.
Commissioner Neely?
I was
Yes.
going to second it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, did you already do it?
I made the motion, you can second it.
Oh,
But you got to lean in so we can hear you.
I would like to second it.
Okay. Please call the roll, please.
Commissioner Kwok,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Klopp is absent, Commissioner Reiser,
Yes.
Commissioner Nating,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson is absent, Chair Strongman.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to commission considerations. Do we have any?
One announcement by staff. The May 23rd, 2024 Planning Commission hearing will likely be canceled, and staff will provide an update as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to item 6, commission member staff reports or announcements. Seeing none, we will now be adjourned.